always get up after that mistake. That's the thing. You haven't failed until you stopped. At one point, he sort of stops me and just says, like, just keep in mind that no one has gone to their grave wishing they'd worked more.
Welcome back to Skyward, the podcast that brings you behind the scenes of the aviation and aerospace industry. I'm your host, Pilot Mercedes, and today we're joined by Captain Jason McGillis, a maritime helicopter pilot with Royal Canadian Air Force. From joining the military straight out of high school with no flying experience to flying the Sea King and now instructing on the CH-148 Cyclone, Jason's had an incredible 18-year career in naval aviation.
The captain has turned on the seatbelt light. Please take your seat and fasten your seatbelts. Thank you.
Jason, welcome to Skyward. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Let's start off with what initially drew you to the idea of joining the Canadian Armed Forces right out of high school, and what factors influenced your decision to list pilot as one of your top trade choices?
Right. So probably several factors involved in that. I come from a fairly military-oriented family. My grandfather served for a full career. My aunt served for a short stint. And
oh, wow.
I have something like 4 uncles/great uncles that all served in the Navy. And my cousin served in Afghanistan. So quite a lot of the family put on the uniform, and I kind of grew up around, all the pictures and the history and everybody talking about it. So it was pretty like on the top of everybody's minds in the family. So it wouldn't be abnormal for anybody of my generation to have joined up. So one of the other big factors, like admittedly, there's duty to country, loyalty, all that jazz. But I learned that there's a program called the Regular Officer Training Program, which is they'll pay you for your 4-year degree. And then you just owe them. Yeah, you just owe them time in return at the end of it. So I figured that'd be easy. I mean, like my parents we weren't poor or anything. We were firmly middle class, but trying to put 3 kids through university might have been a little tight for them. I figured I'd just free up a little bit of cash and let the government pay for mine instead. So, so decided to enlist, wanted to go to Royal Military College. I'd heard a lot of good stories the moment I'd poked around to learn more about this pathway. When I walked in the recruiting center, I didn't actually research a great depth of all of the possible officer trades in the military. So I walked in with just a general idea of people that I had from the family, right? I had a whole bunch of people in the Navy, I had a whole bunch of people in the Army, and almost nobody in the Air Force.
Okay.
I knew about piloting, of course, and that'd be an option. So when I walked in, I saw the posters and said, I guess I have to pick 3 choices. Really what they gave you. They gave you 3 on the form.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it might have changed, but at the time it was 3 on the form for your ideal choices.
What
and they
you would love to do.
Yeah. And they can offer one of those 3. They can also give you an offer for something else entirely, if they so choose, if you meet requirements and all that. But I put down pilot as my first choice. I didn't know what to fill for the other 2. I hadn't really thought that far. I figured that was probably where I really wanted to begin and end, but I've always liked tanks, so I put armored as my second choice.
Fair enough.
and I'm pretty sure, I can't really recall, it's been too many years, but I'm pretty sure I put, we called them Mars officers, but they're now called naval warfare officers, which is the generic naval officer trade. So the people who drive the ships. So I put down pilot, and when you put that down, they basically send you off to aircrew selection to verify that you are, in fact, medically and I suppose mentally capable of being a pilot or the other aircrew trades that fall under this. So I put it down and got it through, and here I am, I guess.
Amazing. Was there any challenges that you had after getting into the program, or no?
I mean, aircrew selection was a challenge. That was my first real introduction to the Air Force. I had to go to Trenton, which wasn't too far away because I was in Ontario at the time. We lived in Whitby, so Trenton was a few hours up the road, but nothing crazy. So we go there for a week, and you get given a package, like a study package of what you're going to be dealing with for that period. And it's changed now, and I helped do some of the testing. So I know what kind of both look like at this juncture, but back when I went through aircrew selection it was an old simulator, but not like a real simulator. It was really just a glorified video game. You get in this box and there'd be like a little screen and it would give you some basic instrumentation of where your aircraft is, height and speed. And all you had to do was fly it in the 3-dimensional circuit pattern that it gave you. But incredibly primitive. Like the landing was basically drive the aircraft down at like the 3-degree glide slope, and then you would just hit the ground, which you didn't even see. There was no blue or gray. It was just a black screen with just green pixels showing you where you were.
Wow.
And then the whole thing too was designed to always fight against you a little bit. It'd be like, trying to hold something on top of a ball. And so you're always falling off of it and having to correct. And that's by design to make you constantly fight for the little corrections. So I guess
is a very good test. It was a very good video game to test.
Yeah. And I mean, I think one of the simulators was wonky. We cycled through them just to make sure, but some people always felt that one of them on each day of testing was just worse than the others. But I think what they looked for the most part, wasn't necessarily your ability to hold the ideal line at all times. It was watching the daily trend over the 3 or 4 days that we did this testing to see how much closer on average we were to that ideal. So it was interesting.
Yeah.
I played a lot of video games, so it was kind of fun to just get in there and do something challenging like that. And then there's the aircrew selection time. Also, they tested for a few other trades, which included the air combat systems operator and the air traffic control. And part of that was just like they give you, pictures of different aircraft and, spatial visual assessment. But one of them was this most miserable thing I've ever done. They give you a table, and the table was something like 2 or 3 dozen fields across the top and about 2 or 3 dozen fields across the bottom. And there's no rhyme or reason to them. It would just be numbered 1 through whatever, and then letters, AAB, like AC, all the way down the left-hand side. And then the numbers in the middle of the table were randomly generated numbers. And the entire test was simply to go down. It would say what value is at AA 17. And then you'd have to cross-reference that on the chart, find it, and put it in there. And it was a multiple choice, so you'd have to figure out which answer you're also looking for and go back between the tables. And it was a time-limited test. Like there's almost no way to complete it 100%. Maybe some air combat systems operator listening to this will argue with me that it was in fact possible to do it, but I failed it horribly, which was fine. Yeah, but that was specifically for the air combat systems operator one. Right. So the piloting one I did fine. So I got they give you these just a little cut line at the end of the 3 days, 4 days, 5 days of testing, whatever it was, telling you what trades you were eligible for at the end of the aircrew selection. So I got mine, and it simply just said pilot. I failed the other 2. I could not be an air traffic controller or an AXO. So, so that was like the first real challenge. And then you do an aircrew medical where you sit down and they measure everything about you, make sure your height and general size all would fit in various airframes in the Canadian Forces. So that was fine. But that was the first real challenge. And after that, it was off to pilot training, which is a whole nother long tail.
Oh, I bet. All right, follow-up question. Is there a maximum and a minimum then that height-wise that a person can join the RCAF?
So
for
I don't have
piloting specific.
Right. So I don't have the specific numbers, so I'm not gonna give like exact ones, but I do know that certain airframes specifically will restrict who's allowed on them. And that's from a safety perspective.
Of course.
So for example, like a Hercules has no minimum or maximum. Like it's a standard flight cockpit with lots of room, lots of headroom. You're fine. But I know that certain fighter jets, for example, would struggle if you were abnormally tall. And I don't know this for a fact, so I won't speculate too much, but I heard a few people who had to sign waivers because for an ejection seated aircraft, if your legs were not positioned correctly, you could potentially damage yourself in the ejection process. But
yeah, and you definitely don't want that for sure.
No.
But very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Looking back on how did your early interest in planes, helicopters, and other flying machines evolve, even if it wasn't a strong childhood dream to become a pilot?
Yeah. So that's a funny thing when I talk to people, especially a lot of other pilots. I never really grew up kind of picturing myself as a pilot. It never really sat with me in a way. I want to be an architect at one point. So like that's where my brain was. Yeah. But I mean, I played tons of video games as a kid, and a lot of them happened to be very kind of traditionally kind of fighter piloty oriented, playing like the Star Wars games and
Yep.
games like Crimson Skies. So that always had a latent interest. And then my uncle used to scratch build like fighter kits, like little,
Oh,
scale model.
wow. Those are great.
But like, it wasn't just he would assemble an existing kit and call it a day. It was he would basically grab the kit just for the basic large pieces that were annoying to fabricate on his own, like the wings and the fuselage. And then from there, he would go to air shows. And this is pre-internet days, or like very, very early internet. So these pictures were not available anywhere. So you'd have to go to the air shows, take pictures himself of the cockpit, and then go and then scratch build and put tiny little pieces for every little switch. And we're talking, a scale model where the cockpit is not much bigger than your finger. And he's scratch building individual switches inside of the these little models. So we'd build some of these kits together. A lot simpler, of course. I remember building a Hind, the Russian Hind helicopter with him growing up, in a Cobra, the Maritime kind of attack helicopter. So yeah, that definitely cemented some interest in aviation.
Absolutely. And diving into the details, no general anything, like making sure it's accurate, correct, personal studies into it and everything. Wow, that's a lot of commitment for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
He really liked it. And like, we went to air shows together. I also went to air shows with an aunt not related to that uncle as well. So I went to a few of them growing up. So maybe that had a latent impact that I never really truly processed.
A subconscious, this is kind of fun. This is interesting. Well, that's really cool. Now, tell us more about your educational background. How did pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in Military and Strategic Studies shape your path into aviation, especially with virtually no prior flying experience?
Right. So the degree has virtually zero relevance to aviation. It's really what it really is it's a combination history, international politics, and a little bit of psychology of leadership, kind of ethics looking degree. And so this is at the Royal Military College, which is one of the only two schools, I think, in the country that offers a degree in its name. I think U of Calgary might also as well. Yeah,
Interesting.
It's just, most people just do a degree in history and then specialize in military side of the house just on their own volition. So this particular melange that they had concocted at the Royal Military College was kind of designed to be as flexible as possible. And most of my requirements was simply to conduct do 3 history degrees at the 4-year level, or 3 history courses at the 4th year level, 2 politics courses at the 4th year level, and then 1 psychology. And I would get to pick which specific topics I wanted to explore. So I think my last year I was doing like nuclear theory, like nuclear warfare theory, and counterterrorism was what I took my last year. So really, it was a generic look at history, which I've always been fond of. I've always loved psychology, ethics, and the international politics was interesting. I never really kind of got into it, but it was fun to take a look, at least at just the undergrad level. And I do not believe myself to be an expert in any of these fields, but it was certainly very interesting, and it was nice that I got to curate that academic experience to my liking more than some of the other degrees that were available at the time. So all of the officer trades in the Canadian Forces on paper require a degree. There are exceptions. There's stars and asterisks that would go next to that statement, but you require a degree to be an officer is the easiest statement to throw it out there in the Canadian Forces. So certain trades require a specific subset of degrees, whereas pilot was an open, you could pick whatever you wanted.
Interesting.
There is no limit. You did not have to have an aviation background. You didn't have to have a science background, no engineering. There were quite a number of pilots that I went through training with that came from an aeronautical engineering background. But there are tons of us who had fairly straightforward arts degrees. But if you were a communications and electronics engineer, for example, or a maritime systems engineer, you had to have an actual engineering or a handful of science degrees were also permitted. So you had to possess, I suppose, the minimum amount of technical background.
So if you didn't go for that degree, what other one would you have possibly? Was there a toss-up, or was that a pretty clear option for you?
That was it was a pretty clear option for me. In an ideal world, the Royal Military College doesn't offer a full biology degree. And
Okay.
I actually started, I started first year in a, like first year is basically just an all-purpose sciences, but I was gearing up to specialize towards a chemistry degree. And I found that I didn't like the math at the time. It really didn't work with me.
Okay.
The actual science portion, fine. It was the math that I really struggled with. So I switched into arts because that was also a passion of mine. But if I could go back and if they had a biology degree, I would have specialized straight in biology. I've always enjoyed that as far as the sciences go. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, science is such a broad subject that you can cover so many different things, and some need more math than others. All of it needs math in general, but very interesting. Then what was your very first exposure to flying like, such as any familiarization flights or fan flights, as we like to call them, before aircrew selection? And what misconceptions or surprises did you encounter along the way?
So my grandfather got me a 1 hour long famil flight in a Cessna when I had formally applied. I think this was post aircrew selection as well. So this is like a few months before I got shipped off to basic. Just to give me a taste of what, if we're going to go do this, may as well figure out to make sure everything's going to be okay. It wouldn't be violently airsick or something. So we get in the Cessna. It was fascinating. It was a really, really cool experience. I don't really remember a lot of it. It was an hour and there was so much going on in my life that this particular memory has not been really revisited all that much. But I do remember when the pilot at the time was describing how to do a crosswind landing. It's a minor amount of crosswind. And so I just imagined lining up at the runway and calling it a day, right? I knew nothing about how the wind was going to impact what was going on. So, and like, flying around for a little bit, I was like, I could understand like moving, stick in one kind of directions, two directions at a time. That kind of worked fine, power doing power things. Okay, this kind of makes sense. But the moment he tried to explain that I needed to, like, he's trying to explain what crabbing was. I didn't understand what crabbing. It just like this was not something that we had pre-briefed or talked about anything. So trying to do it on the fly when my brain is already full of everything to do with aviation at this point, I had no clue. And then at that point, he's like, "You got to cross control," and he's like showing me that he's got his, all of his hands and feet are doing everything that needs to happen.
Yep.
I like tried to do it, I think, for 5 minits, and he kind of just laughed and then landed the aircraft. But yeah,
That's great.
It was something anyways. So it's cool. I didn't get airsick. That's, I think, that's a plus, though we'll revisit that point later. But
okay. And I look forward to it. But yeah, definitely good you weren't airsick.
Yeah. One of the misconceptions was I didn't know what a ramp was. I honestly thought the first time I heard a ramp when I joined the military and people kept talking about the ramp, I thought it was literally just a giant inclined plane that you'd like roll the aircraft down like a ramp. Not just a place where you park aircraft.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
It's like, it is like little things like that. Like I walked in with zero experience to all this. So it was hard to even have misconceptions because I didn't even know what to have a conception about in the first place, whether or not it'd be true or false. It was all entirely new. So showing up at phase 1 for pilot training, which is designed to take people like me directly off the streets with zero experience. And in a way that helps some people who do have like cadet experience through gliders and even the actual like power license that some of them can get onto.
Yep.
In a way, they showed up more prepared, but they also come with a problem that they show up with all of the habits, good and bad.
Yeah.
So then those habits need to be not necessarily broken, but need to at least be bent and reshaped, which is different than me showing up and just purely on receive. I don't know. I don't have anything. So I just listen and follow and do all that. So there's ups and downs to it because I definitely, during all the theory lessons, was wakeboarding behind everybody else when they're all easily caught up with everything that's going on. So.
But they had possible habits either to unlearn or to mold into a different direction, whereas you're just absorbing all the information and following exactly what you've heard the first time, which is great.
I remember when we were learning so phase 1 of pilot training is basically just hard VFR. We call it clear hood flying, but basically just hard VFR. There's minor bits of aerobatics, which was kind of fun. Like we had 20 hours in the aircraft, and they're already getting us to do barrel rolls.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah,
so
so
fun.
it is
I
fun.
wish
So
I
we
did
get to
that for
do
my PPL.
right. So that's one of the cool things that we show up. We're on the Group G120 Alpha, which is 6-cylinder piston powered, but fully aerobatic plane. So low wing, and it's
Mhm.
what is a side by side instructor arrangement. So we're sitting there. It's
Okay.
got decent power, but all of your aerobatics, you had to start at a high altitude and you'd always finish at a lower altitude. So whenever you're doing your aerobatic
Mhm.
sequence, you had to start at, 8,000 feet and then you finish your loop and you'd be down at, 5,000 feet. And then you do a roll,
Yep.
you'd be down to 45 and so on and so forth. So you're just trading energy the whole way down. But it was cool. And so we're like 10 flights into ever flying and they're already telling us how to do a full, like we had to do a loop, a roll, and, basically it's just the giant kind of, I forget the name off the top of my head, but basically kind of the wing overs, just big lazy wing overs.
Yeah. Yes. Wing over. Yeah.
Yeah, it
I didn't
was,
get to do any of that until my CFI for my spin training. So I wish I had that for my PPL. That would have been so much fun.
it was a whole thing. So then on phase 2, that's when we that's when we get our instrument tickets. We do a whole thing on, almost half the course is frankly dedicated to instrument, flying. And the theory was a whole thing. And so phase 2 is also where anybody on the civilian who joins straight off Civvy Street, through non-traditional streams, let's say they already had their commercial license, they get to skip phase 1 and they go straight to phase 2.
Okay.
And so they showed up already with instrument tickets from civilian side, some of them anyways. And so when we're doing the theory, they're kind of like laughing along, being like, this is a joke. I already get this. But I'm just sitting there not understanding the core concept of when I'm looking in my, for heading, I always assume that I existed in the middle of the compass and that the needle just point to where I'm going and so on and so forth. You tune in your beacon and off you go in that direction. But they kept explaining to us that we exist on the tail of that needle. And it took weeks for my brain to actually understand that core concept. Once he did, it worked out perfectly, but it just for like weeks, just I rejected. Like, there's no way I'm on the tail of something that's a circle. Like, I'm in the middle of the circle. It's all relevant. Like, that's the only way this can be. But it made sense in the end. But it was difficult for me to understand that. And those are some of the kind of, when you show up with no experience, that you had to really kind of learn on the fly very quickly.
Well, so how much time were you given to truly grasp all the information? What was the time frame?
So phase 1 is on paper is like 3 months long was the whole course. And you spend about, I want to say about a month in ground school. Like, this all changed since I went through. So no one can get too upset with me right now for spreading any misinformation, but because it's all changed. I know, for example, the new phase 1 is something like 12 events long, whereas mine was 24. So
okay.
There's a bit of a difference. So I had a little bit more actual physical flying.
Okay.
So that I could kind of learn and massage any issues I was having. But the ground school was just a month-long fire hose, and you just had that long to do it, and you just had to pass. And I mean, I was, out of 30-odd people on my course, I was dead last, or second last, I can't remember exactly. But I struggled. It was a whole very difficult thing to absorb that amount of information, that amount of time. For me anyways. Other people were perfectly fine. And then the flying, that was the whole thing too, because every day was you learn a new thing, right? And then we had levels from nominally 1 to 5. 1 is functionally, people very rarely get 1s. You have to be an actively combatant individual against your instructor, and dangerous to get a level 1. So basically, the first time you do something after your instructor's demoed it, it's broadly speaking like a level 2. Level 5 is you've done it more or less perfectly, which isn't quite the definition. As an instructor, I could spit you out the exact one, but that's not relevant for here. So 90% of your scores are going to fall between a 2 and a 4. And the terminal level that you need for most of these courses is a level 4. Some things are level 3, but that's all syllabus dependent. So every time you start a flight, you get it to a level 2, but then the next flight, you're learning new things at level 2, but then also having to upgrade the previous flight's evolution to a level 3, and then so on and so forth. And that just cascades further and further and further, so that every day you're learning something new to level 2, upgrading something else to level 3, and upgrading something even further behind you to level 4 standard. And that was difficult for me in phase 1. And I remember hitting at least one remedial flight point where I had not met the required levels, and I was not getting along with my instructor.
Oh, no.
Yeah, which was a whole thing. But it was a great learning experience, and that's really what the important thing about all this is being able to recover from these things and push on. So I got through just fine, but it was interesting. Is that if I'd failed again, that would have been it. They would have said, "Thank you for your time. Go find another job to do in the
Wow.
military," and that's it. So I
So
got
you
through.
kind of, in a way, you have kind of one shot. You have like a one shot grace kind of idea.
It's changing a little bit now, just for again how they're doing these courses and what they're what they're kind of looking for, and realizing that there's an investment with these people, that just running them through a certain amount and then calling it a day and kicking them to the curb is not conducive, because all of this can be learned. So
Absolutely.
the culture has shifted, and it's a lot less like that. It still can. Like, if you show up and you just struggle and there is no way to learn, then like that happens. It's unfortunate. So anyways, I basically came dead last on phase 1, and survived to phase 2, which was good. It was much better in phase 2. And then phase 3 is where you specialize into either your rotary flying or your fixed wing flying or your fast jet flying.
Okay, well, that brings us to our next question. When it came to choose your specialization, what led you to opt for helicopters over other options? And how did that decision align with your personal life at the time?
So yeah, there are a few factors that played into that. I've been with my wife since high school. We're traditional high school sweethearts in that sense. And
Which is wonderful.
It is. It's great. She joined the military a year after me, and then she ended up going Navy. So I knew this entire time that she was going to be a naval warfare officer. To make that work, like the Navy is in 2 locations, 3 nominally, but the big 2 are going to be Halifax and Victoria, right? That's where 2 naval bases are. The third universal choice is Ottawa. Anybody can go to Ottawa, but that's not where you do your career. So she was going to spend a large amount of time on one of the 2 coasts. The only Air Force platform close to that is the Maritime helicopter platform, which is also located in Halifax and Victoria, technically Pat Bay and Shearwater, but basically same city functionally. The next closest would have been any one of the search and rescue units, which are then located in, there's one in Comox, which is up island from Victoria, and there's Greenwood, which is, an hour and change away from Halifax. So those could have been options, but both of those are also, there's fixed wing options there with the Buffalo on the west coast and the Herc on the east. There's also the rotary element of the Cormorant is on both of those bases. A number of my flight instructors through phase 2 were ex-rotary people. Not necessarily ex-rotary. They were doing it temporarily, and that happens, that they do a whole bunch of tours flying, and then they will come and teach back at the schoolhouse as giving back. Like, we often have to go teach back at a basic schoolhouse as just the cycle of experience. So I flew with a few of them who were ex Maritime helicopter and search and rescue, and they spoke very fondly of their time in the helicopter world, and they just loved helicopters and they missed it. Whereas some of the other people that I flew with who came from other backgrounds were a little less enthused by it, about their backgrounds, and then were there to try and branch off. And part of it too is that if you got posted to that schoolhouse, when you were done, sometimes you can negotiate to go to a different platform than the one you previously came from.
Interesting.
So some people are doing that as a stepping stone to move along. So it shaped how I looked at it. And then when I looked at where I wanted to end up, it was obviously try to make the relationship with my wife work. So that'd be helicopter, and then eventually Maritime helicopter when I further specialize. Because you basically just pick, at the end of phase 2, you pick if you're going to go one of 3 streams: a fast jet, transport, or rotary. And then in phase 3, you then pick the community you want to end up in, which would be Maritime, TAC Hel, search and rescue, and yeah, that's basically it. And then from there, you could subspecialize in the specific actual platform from the community, but that kind of goes hand in hand when we do our selections.
And so the 2 of you are both in the same area now as well. Yeah.
So when I finished up phase 3, I had requested Maritime helicopters, and I made that abundantly clear at every step of the way. And almost half of the school, like the instructors at the school at the time, were Maritime helicopter pilots. So when I made it clear to every single one of them that my goal was to end up flying Sea Kings, because that's what we were flying at the time, not the Cyclone yet, that I want to fly Sea Kings, they were all very supportive and kept telling me about how great it was, how much they loved it, telling me stories about it, which really just cemented that how much more I wanted to fly. Like, it seemed cool to be on the back of a boat, go deploy all the time.
They made it sound like an adventure. They made it sound really appealing.
And they genuinely spoke fondly of it too. Like, it's just all the instructors that were from the MH background all got together all the time and would always share stories. Like, they seemed very cohesive, which was nice. So it felt like a very friendly community. And this isn't to slander any other communities for anybody listening to this. Like, they all seem great too. But that's just what really,
it really
jumped
drew
out
you.
at me. And then again, with my wife being Navy, like, she wanted to end up in Halifax, and that was back in the day when Halifax was much cheaper than Victoria. So she wanted to end up in Halifax.
Is it not the case now?
No, Halifax is
I don't know.
Is almost as expensive as Victoria these days. Victoria's still a little bit more expensive, but it's no longer like Halifax used to be almost half the price to buy a house. You'd pay more in taxes, but yeah. And anyways, I won't get into what my house is worth right now, but
no,
we bought
that's okay. But
yeah.
Because I've spent most of my life in Ontario, so I don't know how. I know BC has always been very expensive, but I didn't realize that Halifax has also gone up quite significantly. So,
and
just an added interest.
Yeah, and it's interesting. She did her training, like the main naval warfare school is out on the West Coast. So she spent, 2-3 years on the West Coast doing all of her training. And I spent a year on an on-the-job training posting in Comox. So that's also on the island. And like, we both love the West Coast. The island is incredible. Absolutely love it there. So part of it was also like, let's go and experience something new. She wanted to go to Halifax. She got that a year before I finished up my wings course. So she was already living in an apartment in Halifax when I said I wanted to go fly Sea Kings. And then they realized that we got married while I was on my course to really drive home that point. Because now if we were just engaged or dating, the military doesn't care. Not that they don't care, but you know what I'm saying? From an administrative standpoint, there's no benefit that happens between people dating, but there is benefits that happen when you two are married. So we got married while I was on phase 3, which was a whole administrative thing, which kind of cracked me up at the time. But we got married, which then at that point, the career manager has to sort of look at our two careers and try and make something somewhat harmonious. Ideally, they could ignore that entirely, but then they're now dealing with two disgruntled members instead of just having two happy ones.
Right.
So I got Maritime helicopters. I topped my course, which was another big motivator to doing well in this one, because generally the rule was if you're the top candidate on your course, you typically got what you wanted. They would pull out whatever stops they could to make that happen. Wasn't a guarantee. They made that abundantly clear, but nonetheless, the general practice was top your course. This was the reward, was you get what you wanted. So I said, I want East Coast Sea Kings. I got it, and then we moved out to Halifax/Shearwater, and that's where I've been since.
Wow, it sounds like an amazing personal story and connection, and I loved hearing about how you and your wife got married, and that just really drove the point home. That's great.
Yeah,
has any of that changed for people now? Or is that still kind of the same atmosphere?
Well, there's plenty of people who realize that before, if they're in a serious relationship with someone and they know that there's a posting coming up and like they're either engaged or planning on it, that if there is like a posting that they're going to go through, then a number of people will just make that decision to like go and just get an on paper marriage done so that they can legally present that as a whole thing, and then just do a more celebration,
like a celebration,
later on once they're settled. But it's because the government will give, like, not to say give you more money, but we'll make sure that your spouse, will move with you, and there'll be funding allocated for that as like a family unit versus a single individual. And like, we can argue, about the policy, but that's not the point here. But there is some financial benefit to being an actual legally kind of family unit, as the government would be concerned.
Very interesting. And then going back to your helicopters, and how has the close connection between the Royal Canadian Air Force and the Royal Canadian Navy influenced your career?
We're certainly a unique branch of the RCAF. So all of my leadership, from the absolute bottom all the way to the top, I serve under the RCAF umbrella.
Okay.
That is an absolute fact that does not change. Where it gets odd is that, for example, Shearwater is technically a lodger unit, like a subservient unit to the Halifax base, like dockyard, so the naval base. So we don't necessarily belong to them, because that's probably a strong word for what their relationship actually is, but we're not a fully independent Air Force base in the way that, say, Trenton is. So
interesting.
So we're obligated to have a very close, friendly relationship with the Navy, because not doing that would just be shooting ourselves in the foot. But the other half of it is that we realize that we're all aiming to do the same mission, right? Like we consider ourselves to be naval aviators, because that is our job, is to go onto a boat and provide one of the unofficial mottos for the wing is simply just wings for the fleet. We provide that service, which, fundamentally we're an anti-submarine warfare platform. So we're to go and hunt submarines. So we provide additional range for the ship in that specific aspect. But the other half of it is that we simply provide everything that a helicopter can provide. All the logistical support, the additional search and rescue capability that comes with it. So whether we're moving people, moving goods, or helping find anything, then that is what we can lend, in addition to a few other smaller subtasks. But we are a integrated air asset to a Canadian warship, and we understand that we are just part of the larger piece. And it's worked out well for me this entire time. I've gotten along with all my naval friends and colleagues on the ship, and it's always like driven into us that we all work together to accomplish the mission as one. The fact that I wear a different colored uniform than everybody in the ship is, makes us stand out a little bit at times, but we all get along.
Well, that's fantastic. Keeping the community and keeping the same mindset that you're all in this together, essentially. That's fantastic.
There's a really good, again, like when you get into it, I find there's such a good mutual respect amongst all of us in very distinct professions. I can't do the job that my naval warfare officer peers can do. I'm not qualified to do it. They are experts in their fields. They're held to an incredibly high standard. I have all the time in the world for them, and I hope the same thing in return. I won't speak for them, but from what I've gathered, that is the truth. There's good-natured ribbing between all of us, as would happen between two different services, and I would expect nothing less. But it's a very good collaborative effort of us trying to provide what we should be providing to the Navy, and doing the best we can in that regard.
That's fantastic. Now, walk us through your early experiences in the fleet, including qualifying for specific aircraft, and what stands out during that period for you.
So to give you a little bit of background is on phase 3, the two aircraft that I flew were a Bell 206, the little Jet Ranger, which is a very simple, straightforward, largely analog machine. So it was hydraulically boosted, but it had no actual stabilization on it. So a very raw helicopter, just simple gauges, nothing crazy. And I've got a lot of time for the 206. Then after that, we step up to the Bell 412, which when you paint it green and change a few things is what the Army flies, the Griffin. But the Bell 412 is a pretty universal workhorse that you will see everywhere that you go. And so the 412 was a partial glass cockpit aircraft at the time. So a few of the displays were digitized, a few others were just traditional, were traditional gauges, but it was this was an actual partially automated aircraft. So it wasn't a full 4-axis autopilot, but we had 3, and we had a stabilization system on board called the SAS. So it did a few things, help us with like a force trim function. So I got to, and it had an FMCDU flight, Jesus, I can't remember what that'd be, the flight management control display unit. There we go.
Yep, there you go.
So that was our first introduction to the FMCDU and how to program. And so that was learning our instrument, for helicopters on there by plugging in all that and being able to couple up, at least partially. We had like indicator speed hold and altitude hold on there. So we could basically get up to our altitude, hit the buttons that we needed to, and then it would fly us. And we had lateral navigation as well for GPS. So we could fly in lateral navigation, what we programmed on the FMCDU. So that was what I graduated with my wings with. And then I show up to fly the Sea King, and now I'm cast back 60 years of technology.
Oh.
So the Sea King, right, was, 3. I'm probably going to get lambasted later for not having it off the top of my head, but the 60s anyways, right, was when this thing was built and flown. So everything was just nothing but steam gauges. It didn't even have a standard T.
Oh, wow.
So like you'd have to look up a picture later or like flash one up if that's possible. But there is no
absolutely.
The standard T does not exist in it. So it's not just you're looking at your attitude and the heading and airspeed and altitude. It's all over the place, and it's in a way kind of illogical, but you get used to it like anything once you fly it long enough. So it was very interesting having my cross check go from what I'd learned on, which was standard T, all the way down until you get on this machine and it's all over the place. So just where everything that you want to be. And some of the gauges are mirrored between the left seat and the right seat, and some of the gauges are just simply translated. So it's not even consistent that if you're sitting right seat, left seat, how your cross check would look. Like our NR gauges were down in the middle of the cockpit, so they weren't mirrored, but our torque gauges were mirrored correctly. Like it's just the whole thing was it was a unique experience to then go from an aircraft that had like a nearly full level of automation and an FMCDU that could do all this cool IF stuff with GPS to then go to an airframe that had a TACAN, a VOR, and an NDB. And that's it. So I knew how to fly basically all those things except for TACAN. The other aircraft didn't have TACAN, so it's functionally VOR. So to going back to all that was fascinating. And so it had a few primitive, autopilots, automation systems, which was quite frankly very impressive for the time that it was built. And so learning this machine that was in a way like being cast back in time was a very cool experience, but it was a bit of a shock to go having learned on something that was fairly modern to then going back to this, which wasn't modern. There's no real good way to really spin that, but I've got a lot of time for the Sea King. I thought it was an incredible machine. And learning its quirks and features, because these aircraft were old, they'd been flown a long time, so each one of them had its own personality. And I'm not saying that they flew crooked, but every one of them had a little bit of a quirk that this one needed a little bit of right pedal all the time to maintain its altitude correctly, and this one needs a little bit of left pedal, and I guess one of the weirder stories, I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of myself. No, I think this is still relevant to the question.
It's okay. Go ahead.
There's a basic automation system on it that we called the coupler. And the coupler had like a few basic functions, which was it had a barometric altimeter hold on it. So at any time you're flying, you could hit that button and it would hold your barometric altimeter. There's a whole bunch of knobs that you could twist to get to different settings that you wanted. So it could do that for you. Not much else, but it would be able to do that. But one of the main important things it had was we called it the automatic transition. And so the transition for us from a tactical perspective is to go from a forward flight regime, so like 90 knots at a few hundred feet, and then bring us down to a hover over the water at a set altitude, which would then allow us to put our sonar in the water, which is how we would go look for submarines. We had a big like sonar on a reel that would go down to the water, and that's how you go look for submarines. So we have to go from forward flight to a hover regime over water in all conditions. So they wanted to automate that. In all conditions. That's the thing. So night, day, IFR, VFR. We had to be capable of doing this. So that was the intent behind this machine. So once you started at a set parameter, which at the time was something like 200 feet and 90 knots, you basically hit this one button, and assuming that all the other dials were set up correctly, it would then take you down on its own accord to a 40-foot hover, and then you were good to put the ball in the water and start pinging. So now this was like primitive, very advanced for the time, but now looking back, primitive for what it used. And so I don't actually know the internal logic systems for it, but I know that the two main things it read that it pulled data from was simply how high it was and then how fast it was going, which makes sense. That's really all you need to know at its core to do this. When you're doing how fast you're going, what it used was a Doppler-based radar.
Wow. Okay.
Which normally works just fine if you're in any sort of kind of moderate sea state, because then you're actually getting the feedback of, what is that closure rate to, objects below you, right? You're getting the differences in the waves and it'll read that fine. If it's really actually glassy or very calm, the Doppler radar doesn't read well. Like it'll actually just flash zeros regularly, and then it'll pick up like enough of a difference in the water to get an accurate reading. So what'll happen is that the altitude portion of the logic will work on its own. regardless of the speed portion. But if you're not getting a good speed portion, it'll basically just fly along at whatever speed it is until it gets a reading and then says, oh, I have to slow down. It'll start slowing. And then if it has no other input for a while, it'll just slow at a rate that it's basically pre-programmed to do without kind of massaging anything.
Okay.
Because it's like trying to plot itself against a graph, like in its own brain. Yeah. And so it'll just keep going at a set rate of where it should be going until it gets another reading. So what happens sometimes is that you'd be descending at a very fast speed until it get a reading, right? And then it would just nose up to slow down, but it's not talking to the altimeter portion of it. So then you would just start going up again. And then the altimeter would say, we got to go down. And then it would just start independently saying go down. So you start doing this like elevator effect kind of up and down as it's trying to do bring you down as it's getting its speed. So I've actually had to cancel flight because the weather was too nice. We had no wind, no sea state. So we couldn't do a safe and effective transition using the device because it couldn't get a good reading, which was very funny.
That is not the reason I would ever think for someone to cancel a flight. Sorry, it's too nice out. We got to have worse conditions. We can't go.
To be fair, it was like 35. We were in the Caribbean. It was like 35 degrees. We were fully loaded up with all of our equipment. We had a practice torpedo on, and we had no winds, like zero winds. It was absolutely glass, like a beautiful, picturesque Caribbean night. And the aircraft was not happy. We were pinging off against the torque limiter and just saying like, nope, this is not safe. We're going to go back home and call it a night.
Wow. Yeah. Not the reasoning I would ever think for someone to cancel a flight ever.
Yeah. So that was like the biggest kind of like shock is basically going from a training pilot to becoming an operational pilot, and thinking in that is you're no longer just flying this machine to meet levels to like get to the next course. That now I'm learning this machine to be good at it. And it basically in perpetuity theoretically. So now I'm not just motivated to meet my minimum levels because I need to. I'm here to meet my levels to get good enough to then go deploy, go be operational, do the job, and ensure that what I'm doing is safe and effective. So it was learning kind of the tactics, the doctrine, the culture, and all the little kind of bits that go with that, which was, it was a shock in the sense that it's new, but it was kind of what I expected to happen once I got out of the training system. But it was refreshing and nice to get into that and kind of realize that I'm here now to do the job. So it was good.
That's amazing. Now, this is not listen to any of the questions, but I think a few people may not understand what the T-scan is versus not. So would you be able to explain what that is and how changing it really does change your way of flying the aircraft, your systems, and everything like that?
Right. So I forget when this got rolled out, but probably sometime in the 70s, there's a standard method of laying out basic instrumentation in aircraft, right? And so basically in the middle, if we start from there, would be your attitude. There could be other information on it, but functionally you just be your basic attitude display. And I mean, I've seen on the Snowbird, for example, they call it the black ball of death because all it is a black sphere. There's no different color between sky and ground. It's just black with a white line, and then with negative and positive numbers on it, I believe. So, which can be kind of disorienting. But point is, it'd be your standard attitude of blue sky, brown ground is going to be in the middle, and then below that is going to be your heading. So whatever your general compass is going to be, whether it's a magnetic or if it's on true, but you're going to have that down there as your primary navigation. And then what is it to the left is going to be your airspeed, and to the right's your altitude. Off the top of my head, that sounds right. And they'll be nestled directly to the left of the attitude and directly to the right of the attitude. So it creates a T. And so the scan, what we're taught anyways, is that your scan should be attitude, move to one of the instruments. And it doesn't matter which one, but just for argument's sake, we'll go attitude and then check your airspeed. Go back to your attitude, then go back to then look at your altitude, then go back to your attitude, then go down to your heading, then go back up to your attitude. And you're always going right back to there and not just going around in a circle or anything arbitrary. It's to always double back to the attitude, which is going to be where all of the errors will manifest for any of the differences in any one of those three. So with the seeking, when you didn't have that, you had to relearn some of it. And for example, when you're doing your an ILS, for example, we had a separate gauge entirely that was not attached to our attitude or our heading, the way that like a more modern full glass cockpit would have with just a ticker tape kind of left and right. to
Yep.
give you your glide slope indications. This was off on a separate indicator. So now your standard T was going to be like looking at your attitude. Our heading was below, but then our airspeed and altitude were on the same side. And then the ILS was on like the right side. So now you're just sort of looking in the middle and then having to like jump over here, check one thing, and then jump all over here to double check both your glide slope and your azimuth. And like,
Yep. Totally different way of scanning, and you have to remember to look, I guess you're not keeping it centralized. You really have to keep it a little bit more broad to make sure you're doing things.
Yeah. And then like our for the other kind of more helicopter centric ones, checking our torque, general power is what we call it torque in the for helicopter worlds. The other aircraft with different things that measure a different thing, but for all the aircraft I've flown, it's just called torque. And then NR, which is just the speed of the head. Those were, you have to kind of keep an eye on those, and especially in the Sea King, which did not have a FADEC. So it wasn't manually governed, but it was not a fully automated digital governing system, the way that like a modern aircraft will automatically control all the engine parameters for you. So you did have to make sure that, your engines were matched at all times, that you weren't over torquing, and that your NR was, because you could just change your NR by just dialing back the engines a little bit on the Sea King, and that was common to manipulate that to varying degrees. So you had to bring those into your scan, and those were scattered all over the viewing point. So it was a learning curve in that sense to go from the Bell 412, which was pretty logically laid out, to then the Sea King, which was a bit of a scattershot. And then once again with the Cyclone, then we go to a full modern glass cockpit, which basically has the equivalent of 5 tablets in it. And that is a standard T, but it also has so much more information just present at your fingertips, because that's what they realize people want. So at first it was overwhelming with just how much information is being shown to you every single moment. But once you got used to it, it was incredible. So it was funny just going between semi-modern to old school to then about as modern as it gets.
You're basically, your regular training, that you're grasping for information, then you're overwhelmed by information. So you've had the wide spectrum of both ends.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, well, it also shapes you as a very good pilot, I have no doubt. So you're able to do the analog flying very well, and now the very modern flying. So, would you be able to teach him both of those as well?
So I didn't get instructor qualified on the Sea King, so I didn't teach that. I got to the highest category, and then that was it. What we call a crew commander. And then we stopped because I transitioned to the Cyclone. But could I have taught? I mean, maybe that'd be speculation. In fact, I'm teaching the Cyclone now. It probably means I could on the Sea King, but that's purely speculation. It's funny because the Sea King was actually shockingly easy to fly for what it sounds like on paper. The automation that it came with, that was developed back in the 60s, was quite frankly very impressive for the time. Like it was a system where you basically had a force trim. So the cyclic, the stick in the middle was sort of, it would stay in its location, right? And you were just pushing against it. And the moment you would let go, it'd basically spring back to where it was originally. You could turn that off if you wanted to, which you never really did except for practicing certain minor emergency scenarios that we would do. But you'd be flying around just pushing against this stick. And so what ends up happening is that when you're in forward flight, you'd obviously have you'd want to bias the aircraft trim forward. And so you had the hat on top of the stick that you just push around as a normal trim function. The same way you would in almost any other aircraft that I've flown. And then you would just relieve the pressure in your hand until you were at the attitude you wanted. You would let go, and that'd be it. It was super easy. So you basically would set what you want and then trim out the pressure, and that's where the aircraft would then fly to. And it was super nice and gentle that way. And likewise, when you're slowing down to the hover, you just pull back to flying in the hover. And the moment you're in the hover, you're fighting against that kind of latent pressure of where you had reset the kind of neutral position. So now you're fighting the back. All you have to do is pull back on your hat. And it would just bleed out the pressure as it then resets to a new neutral position that you're telling it to. Then you fine tune the trim a little bit, and you'd be able to let go of the cyclic anyways, and the aircraft wouldn't go anywhere if you had it trimmed correctly.
Really?
So
that's very interesting.
It was a shockingly...
I've never flown in a helicopter, civilian, like any experience at all. I've only done fixed wing, so that's very interesting, and I didn't know you could actually let go of it if you actually trimmed it properly.
I mean, you shouldn't be you should be letting go of the controls at any point. But the whole point was that was kind of the test to like when we were learning how to really land on the back of the deck of the ship. You basically had to have no bias in there because otherwise, if you're over the deck of the ship and you had, let's say, the forward bias that you'd have from flying around at normal forward speeds. If you're to let go or in a moment that you forgot to have that pressure, the aircraft would naturally then move forward, and then what's in front of you is the hangar. And that's not what you want to be flying into when you're landing on the ship.
Yeah.
So you'd basically fly up, and how we would approach these things, we'd fly up basically exactly parallel with the position we want to land on, like we're directly adjacent to it. And then we'd look across to where we want to go and then just trim the aircraft sufficiently so that we could let go of the fore and aft pressure, and we wouldn't be moving away from that position in either fore and aft direction. And then we knew we were adequately trimmed, and then we just have to move the stick right to then slide over the deck where we wanted to go. And then just obviously fine tune from there and making it sound a little simpler than what it was. But that was the gist of it. But honestly, shockingly, like the stabilization equipment it had was very advanced. It communicated very well to the pilot, was very easy to control and manipulate, and just did a wonderful job at smoothing out a lot of the burbles that would just happen with helicopter flying. And people who've flown like a 206 and something a little bit bigger will understand kind of what that is. And the Sea King was very, very nice for that.
Very interesting. Now, with the Sea King, could you share some of your insights from your operational deployments on that aircraft and how those experiences tied into significant events like the retirement of the last destroyer?
Right. So, I did a whole bunch of sailing along the eastern seaboard with the Sea King, doing a lot of like domestic operations. And I say operations, they weren't really operations. There are a lot of exercise that we did. We went down to like the Caribbean a few times and did like sub commander courses. So basically the Americans, sometimes the Canadians would go down there and they'd have to get their submariners fully qualified. And so then we would go down there and provide sort of like the enemy to them, which is good practice for us to go and hunt a submarine in a training environment, obviously. But
right.
So we did that a few times. I went to, fleet weeks on a few occasions and just other exercises with various nations who'd come over to, NATO nations that come over to North America to partake in exercises on our side of the pond instead of us always going over to their side of the pond. So it's cool to just that was like first introduction of working with other militaries and seeing what they're like. And then I got to do we call it like a backfill, where there is someone who was already on an actual overseas deployment. So they were with Opry Assurance at the time. They were getting sent home for some reason, nothing bad, just they were going home. So they needed a pilot to go out there and fill out for it was like 2 or 3 months I was over there. So I got flown out and I met the ship in Morocco. And I've never been to Morocco, so it's a cool experience to be able to fly into there. But they also don't really tell you a whole lot. So there's like, you go there, someone's going to meet you there, and hopefully good luck. So you're getting off the,
okay.
You get off the plane in Morocco, you walk out and you're just trying to look for anybody who's kind of like holding up a sign that says like, HMCS Halifax, or at the time it would have been HMCS Fredericton. And like managed to find somebody, but for a moment it was touch and go because like for 30 minutes there was no one there who was ready to pick me up. And so I had one number for the ship to call, and then in case something was going pear-shaped, but someone got me, everything worked out. I meet the ship there, and it was interesting for me because I'm there. I'm super happy to be there, super excited, motivated to do this. My first time. Prior to this moment, I'd only done a 2-week long, like introductory sail, where I learned what it was like to be on a ship, how to do a deck landing, but that was on a destroyer, and now I'm on a frigate. So I don't know how like the references are for the frigate. I've never done that before, but super keen, super motivated, happy to do this. But I'm walking onto a ship that is now on month 4 of their 6-month-long deployment. This is a crew that obviously great people, happy people, but they're now getting to that kind of like that slump in it that people who've like been on these deployments kind of know about, where like they're kind of looking forward to going home at this point. So I show up all fresh and eager to do this, and a lot of people are like, okay, relax, like we've been here long enough, just slow down a little bit. But so it's funny to just be that different personality at the time, and I've taken that going forward with me as well to try and keep everything as upbeat as I could throughout a lengthy deployment. But I go there. I had a lot of fun. I got to sail around the Mediterranean, see a bunch of countries I haven't seen before, and got to work on a few exercises with other nations that I've never really worked with since then, which was cool. I got to learn the frigate, which would become a trend later on. The destroyers got retired after, so it was my first experience with that. Worked with some great people on that deployment that have become that I still work with to this day. So it was genuinely really, really cool to get out there and get that experience on the Sea King as well. Some fun stories, but we'd be here for an eon if I were to tell every one of them. So, but then I come back.
I believe it.
I come back and I get reposted back to the Athabascan, which is the last destroyer. And the Athabascan at this point in its life was more or less just a training vessel. So it basically served to further the careers of a bunch of people and train new individuals up in various trades. And one of the biggest advantages was that there were 2 hangars on the back of a destroyer instead of 1. So we could have 2 Sea Kings.
Okay.
On here. And we could fly both, not quite simultaneously, but they could both be airborne at the same time. You just had to do a 30-minute stagger. You'd launch one of them, right? And then once that aircraft was airborne, you could launch the second one. And then then the first one would come back 30 minutes before. They could gas up and then retake off and then do the next one, same thing. And then when they were done for the day, the first one would land on. They'd have 30 minutes to basically shut down, fold the aircraft and get into the hangar. And then the second aircraft would land on, fold, shut down. Or shut down, fold in that order, and then get in the hangar. And so we did that, which was a cool experience. Say that I've done dual helo operations on the Athabascan. So like we got to do that.
That's very cool.
Yeah, we had a fun story one time where I was a second helicopter airborne. So we're flying around for the last sortie of the day. And we're not like bingo fuel or anything, but we're getting to that point of like, okay, our mission's done. We always take more gas than we need. We're not flying around on minimum fuel, but we are like, okay, cool. We're 15 minutes back from the ship should be coming to flying stations and prepared to receive us. So we like check in with them. And they're like, oh yeah, so the other aircraft is actually having a problem folding. And folding is literally the act of taking the rotor blades and folding them so that they're in line with the aircraft so that it fits into the hangar, right? Which also
I was going to ask about that. So that's great.
So there's a whole bunch of complicated hydraulics and electrics on the head that will break the connections and then will fold itself in. And so with the Sea King being a 5-bladed aircraft, one of the blades would lock itself in position directly over the tail facing aft. And then you'd have 2 blades front ways and those would fold backwards.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it was a really complicated system.
But the system wasn't folding properly. It was stuck or something like that?
Yeah, and there's 40,000 little micro switches and other problems that can happen. And she's an old girl, but at the same time, it was a fairly well-known system. And so we had a few good technicians on there that knew what to do, but it still just wasn't, they couldn't snap their fingers and make this go away.
Right.
So they knew what the problem was. It was addressable, but it was also one of those things that it could have taken anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes to address. And we're looking down at our fuel gauges thinking that's probably doable for us. Like we can go into eco mode, but also please keep us surprised. Now, don't worry, we weren't going to follow the sky or do anything silly like that because we have a backup emergency thing where we can do an in-flight refueling. So we can basically hoist up a fuel hose. Yeah, we can fly next to the ship, hoist up a fuel hose, plug it into an external port, and then take fuel that way. So that's our emergency case, which we had told them that should be ready just in case this doesn't happen by this minute on the hour. Everything worked out, but it was still one of those funny moments of oh, this is actually happening where we have to think about these factors into helo operations. So,
all right. I have 2 questions for you following this. Why is you said dual helo operations?
Dual helo, yeah.
Helo operations. Why is that so unique? Why can't you do that on a normal basis?
So now it's on our frigates. The 2 ships being at the time, well, technically there are 3, but anyways, 2 that I'm going to talk about because those are my experiences. We had the Iroquois class, which are the destroyers. The HMCS Athabascan was one of those destroyers, and so it had 2 hangar spaces on board. It only had 1 flight deck, large enough for 1 helo at a time. So that's why you do the stagger. And then the other class of ships that we still have right now is the Halifax class, which is a frigate. And the Halifax class frigates are a single hangar, so you can only fit one helicopter on the ship at any given time. So we don't even have the option to have 2 helo operations from the same ship. If you wanted to have 2 helicopters airborne in the same vicinity at sea, you would need to have 2 2 ships in order to do that. Now, we can fly as many helicopters as we want from our home base at Shearwater or Victoria, but I refer to this specifically when we're doing 2 helo operations at sea, which the destroyer could do native to itself, and the frigates need 2 ships in order to have 2 helicopters airborne.
So it was definitely beneficial to have 2 on one ship rather than having 2 ships, for sure.
It just provided, it was just a unique thing. I mean, we'd have to be sitting here for a long time talk about naval architecture and kind of naval fleet doctrine to really dig into that.
Which I would be very interested in, but I don't think we have enough time today.
No.
Then my second question was, you talked about refueling while you were flying. How is that done in a helicopter?
Yeah, so we call it, in our particular case, there's a few other ways to do it, but in this specific context, we call it a HIFR, which is helicopter in-flight refueling, as the name would imply. So, sorry, I speak a lot of acronyms. I'll try and at least say them at least once.
That's okay. That's what I'm trying to ask as we go.
So the procedure is fairly straightforward, that the ship will have its standard refueling hose that just would normally hook up to us normally at the normal port that we take once we're on the ground and doing a standard refueling, which we do generally rotors running, engines turning. We call it a hot refuel, vice a cold refuel that most other people would be familiar with, right? So the hose basically comes out. They have to attach a few little other bits. I'm sure there's probably some naval technician right now who's rolling their eyes at this explanation, but functionally it is the hose with a few extra lengths of it that we take. And so it gets, we call it flaking there's so many naval terms. Anyways, it gets laid out nicely. The naval call it flaking. So you lay out this hose out on the flight deck, and then the helicopter will approach normally, will fly over part of the flight deck, not fully as though it's going to land, just over the whole thing. And so the Seeking and the Cyclone have hoists. So we'd have one of our back-enders, because we're a crew of 4 people. There's 2 pilots in the front, and we have 2 back-enders, one of which is we call him a TACO, which the job is technically an AXO, an Air Combat Systems Operator. But we call him a TACO, which is called a Tactical Coordinator. So they're another officer trade. And then we have a sensor operator, which the name is pretty on the nose. So they are our primary sensor operator. The TACO is capable of doing it, but these guys are the bread and butter of analyzing the raw sensor data that we have. Both of these individuals are qualified to operate the hoist to its fullest extent. So they can do minor search and rescue operations, utility work, so hoisting people up, hoisting up goods, and in this case, hoisting up the fueling hose. So it's a 2-person evolution, because one of them will be laying down on their stomach. There's a fueling port directly below the door, the big cabin door at the back of the aircraft, and you can look a picture up to see this in both the Cyclone and the Seeking. And so just beneath there, so one of the guys will be waiting to receive the hose, and he's laying on his stomach, ready to go. He's already got the cap kind of like unscrewed for where that's going to be received. And then the other individual is sitting there managing the hoist. So they've got the controller, and they're holding onto the cable, and they're, doing all the hand signals to raise, he's saying, I'm raising now, and then to signal for everybody else on the other end who's holding the hose sufficiently that it's providing tension so it doesn't get caught on anything or in and around the flight deck. And then we hoist up the end of the hose. The person laying down on the stomach will grab it and then physically hook it up to the aircraft. There's a way to do it. I'm not trained in doing that. And then once that's hooked up, right, we give a signal to start fueling. So then the guys down on the ship will start putting pressurized fuel through the whole connection. We end up going a little bit lower because we're fighting against gravity. If we're at 40 feet above the deck, then we're fighting that much gravity pressure. So the lower we go, the more of that fuel in rate, liters per minute will enter the aircraft. So we get as low as we realistically can once everything's hooked up. And then we just simply watch. We've got some testing to do, but then we sit there and we can take fuel just that way by sitting in the hover next to the ship, just taking whatever we absolutely can. So we can stay like that until we're all full up and then go away. And that would have been our emergency backup in case it didn't work out that day. So we always have that as an option.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I never imagined that a helicopter could be refueled in flight, because I know they do that with certain aircraft, fixed-wing aircraft, but I didn't think it was at all possible for helicopters because of its unique nature. So you can do like a fixed wing style helicopter refueling, but you need a really big probe. So you can look up pictures of, I forget which exact aircraft it is. Yeah,
that
I'll
the
have to
Americans
look it
fly,
up
but
for sure.
yeah, they have a
Very
massive fueling
interesting.
probe that sticks out far enough ahead that it won't intersect with the rotor. And so then when the drogue, when the fueling probe comes down from the fixed wing, they just line up that
Yeah.
way, and it won't cut it or anything. It's just the probe sticks out far enough ahead that it makes that safe to do so.
Wow. Hey, amazing engineering.
Yeah, we don't do that. We just do the one I described
No,
with the hover.
but
So
still, the fact that it's at all possible is just amazing.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, after achieving at some point your top category on your aircraft, the Sea King, what was the process like for transitioning to training on a new aircraft, the CH-148 Cyclone?
Right. So it was sort of unceremonious for me anyways. Some of the people, so the West Coast got to fly a Sea King for several months after. Just there had to be a transition that somebody took possession of the first few Cyclones. So they picked one unit, the East Coast unit. The West Coast stayed on the Cyclone, the Sea King for a little bit longer. I was East Coast, so they had to pick people at some point to get qualified on this. So there had already been a few people identified as they called it the ICT, the initial Cyclone transition. And they had done a whole bunch of the testing. So a few of these people, with a few civilian instructors, then got together to train up the first initial cadre of standard individuals that would just become the core aviators of the Cyclone. So I got tagged for whatever reason to be a part of that. They called it CT1 and CT2, which was Cyclone Transition or Cyclone Training. I can't remember exactly what the T was for. 1 and 2.
Okay.
And I had just upgraded a crew commander. Like I literally did my crew commander upgrade flight, got told I was good enough to be a crew commander. I did one flight the next week, and then that was my very last Sea King flight. And that was it. I was done.
Wow.
And then I just got told to show back up at the schoolhouse where I got originally trained on the Sea King for 6th Squadron, the squadron I'm currently teaching at now, and told, you're going to start this course. And then I got parachuted back in there, and then they're like, great, here's lesson number 1, basic vehicle. And then it was start clicking through slides of just how long the aircraft is, how heavy the aircraft is, like all the basics. So just start over from square one. And because I had Sea King experience, and most people on the course did, a lot of it was just, yep, this is a maritime helicopter. It does new things that we had to learn, but a lot of how you employ it, that didn't fundamentally change. So it was learning how to fly something new, but how to actually fight it was fairly familiar. Whereas 1 or 2 people on my course we called ab initio. They were fresh out of the schoolhouse and had no Sea King experience prior. So they had to learn a new aircraft and how to fight it, which is what most people have to do. It's what I did with the Sea King. So they were just doing that, but they didn't have any previous experience. So there's a lot of, well, back in the Sea King, we did it this way, which got pretty old for a lot of people. So, but honestly, it was just like being back at school learning another airframe. We had a standard syllabus. It was, and like, I don't want to say that the Sea King is easy to fly, the Cyclone is easy to fly, but the Cyclone is a fully, it's one of the few fully fly-by-wire helicopters in the world. So there's a slew of automation specifically geared to alleviate as much of the actual flying workload as possible. So a lot of us found it to be a pretty easy transition from an actual hands and foot perspective. It flies pretty well. And once you understand the automation logic behind it, it works really, really nice. So
very nice. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what fly-by-wire is, could you explain that?
So this is a case where in, let's say in like a Cessna, when you're moving the sticks in there, you're pulling on cables and rods, right?
Correct.
You're not boosted in any way, shape, and form. It's a pure mechanical. So the Grogue G120 was like that as well, what we flew on. Then the Harvard, I believe, was hydraulically actuated. I can't remember for sure, but maybe not. But the point is, the Bell 206 was a hydraulically boosted aircraft. You could fly with hydraulics. In fact, that was part of our training, is you would turn it off. And then now you're just really fighting against something that is actively trying to fight back against you. So it's difficult, but doable, because the aircraft was still fairly small. So the forces you're trying to overcome are not insurmountable. But the hydraulics made it very light. You could just sit there with literally grabbing on with just your index finger and your thumb and fly cycling. That's what you're encouraged to do, is you're to anchor your wrist against your knee and then only make motions like this big.
Small adjustments, very small adjustments.
Very sensitive. So that'd be like a hydraulically boosted machine. And then you get to the Bell 412, which is hydraulically boosted and electronically assisted with all of its stabilization equipment and minor automation, right? So when you get to a fully fly-by-wire, you now actually, there is no physical connection between the input device and the flight controls. It is purely electrons. There is still hydraulics that are actioning those movements, but the cyclic in the Cyclone is not physically connected to anything. It's only wires that run out of the cyclic. So that runs through a bunch of flight control computers that interpret all, that movement into the appropriate amounts of hydraulic force to actually make the head do all the actions it's supposed to be doing. So the easy way to put it in this case for a fully fly-by-wire system is that there is zero physical connection in terms of a hydraulic or mechanical actuation between me moving any one of the control inputs and then the control surfaces themselves. That there is a purely electrical interface between that.
A fantastic explanation of what fly-by-wire means.
Hopefully, I didn't Google that before, so I'm sure there's going to be some aeronautical engineer kind of rolling their eyes right now. But
well, I would love to have them on to pick it apart. Now, what has it been like being part of the first operational Cyclone detachment on a Royal Canadian Navy vessel? And do you have any memorable challenges or triumphs from that role?
Right. So I guess I forgot to elaborate a little bit on the final destroyer thing. So it's cool to have a kind of a last and a first in there. So I'll wind back just a hair.
Absolutely.
We finished up with the destroyer, the Athabascan. So when we sailed her in from her last trip, which was actually leaving Bermuda, and there's a bit of a historical context there, that we finally got invited back to Bermuda. And really it's that one of the previous Canadian ships that went there were not super nice to the Bermudans. So bit of a mark of shame at that time, but we were invited back, and then we were much better this time. So that relationship will hopefully been amended. So we finished sailing out of Bermuda. The ship wasn't doing so hot. There were some things that happened on there, but we got home safely. Everything was good. And I got to do a formation flight in the Sea King, with another Sea King, like when she was getting paid off to go fly around in the harbor of Halifax, as she was doing her paying off ceremony. So it's pretty cool to get that experience because we don't do a lot of formation flying.
That is very cool.
Yeah. So we do formation flying in training, like in phase 2 with the Harvard. And then every fleet does it differently, but we don't do in the maritime community basically a lot of formation flying. So it's pretty cool to have that experience. So that was the paying off of the 280. The class of ships were called the 280s. So that was cool. And then I get to go on the first operational Cyclone detachment. So we basically went in with a whole bunch of, well, not a whole bunch, but a few of the people on the detachment were some of those initial cadre people I was telling you about that had been selected for the testing. So they had already been flying and operating the Cyclone in a testing environment functionally for a few years at this point. So they knew the aircraft in and out. They're all obviously veterans of the maritime helicopter community. So they knew how to fly the Sea King and they knew how to operate, maritime helicopters with the ships. So there's no lack of ability to just do Cyclone things and do ship things. It was kind of putting those systems together, which had already been tested to adequate degrees, of course, to say that we're good enough to do this in an operational setting. I basically had to show up and then learn a few of the differences between the Sea King and the Cyclone, which we have a thing called the landing safety officer. And it's the person who controls, we call it the bear trap, which is what anchors us onto the deck of the ship. So the ship lands on, it's got a metal probe that sticks down the bottom of it. And when it lands on down there inside the bear trap, which is like a 3 foot by 3 foot square that we're trying to put this probe into, then it's got 2 bars with teeth that will lock around the probe. And that's what keeps us secure on the deck. So that is different than a number of other nations that use a whole different bunch of ways to anchor themselves to the deck of the ship. Ours is one of the highest rated in terms of how many degrees of roll and pitch we could do. We had somebody sitting in this like that is level with the flight deck, so you can see the main probe and the bear trap, and you would control kind of whether they were trapped in there or not. You could control moving the bear trap because it was also on its own track system that would allow you to bring the helicopter in and out of the hangar. This would make a lot more sense with a complicated set of diagrams, but it's an all-in-one system that basically moves the aircraft in and out of the hangar and also allows it to trap it onto the flight deck. So we had to have somebody in control of that, which would be one of the pilots that weren't flying in the aircraft.
Very important.
Yeah, and so we all had to learn how to do that. And functionally, it wasn't that much different than what it was in the Sea King. They'd like change one or two of the buttons, and a few of the displays had changed, and a few of the weights had changed on like the tension the cable could provide. But it really was more or less the same thing. So I was given the Omni blessing after like a very short checkout period, whereas the guy who on there did not have Sea King experience had to run through the traditional package that I went through when I was on the Sea King, right? So they basically used my previous experience and demonstrated I was still capable of doing this, learned the differences, got tested on it, and they said, okay, now you're good on this. Now let's go get your deck qualification, which I already had from a Sea King, but now I had to get it again on the Cyclone. So that was also similarly that, go out there, do a whole bunch of testing, show them that I could still land the aircraft, which had a few differences to how the Sea King operated. But it didn't take too long for anybody with prior Sea King experience to get a handle on the Cyclone, because you're still doing just general maritime helicopter things. Landing on the deck of a ship is a sort of solved problem. So it's really just about doing it in a slightly different platform and to be fair, the Cyclone's 50% bigger in almost every dimension than the Sea King. So there's that much more momentum and inertia for flying it that the Sea King didn't have. So that was one of the biggest challenges. But for me personally, and then as a detachment, a few of the weird oddities was that we were the first ones to do this in anger every single day in all conditions, right? They tested mostly systems in most conditions, but doing it every single day will sort of bring certain kind of deficiencies to light quicker than doing it a handful of times, right?
Absolutely.
And so we had this system at the time where in order to bring the aircraft in to the hangar, you have to do it straight, right? So we had to straighten the aircraft first, because try as I might, I would never land the aircraft on perfectly in the center, perfectly straightened up, exactly lined up with the hangar. So you'd have to go and manually get the aircraft straightened up, right, and centered such that it could go into the hangar without hitting everything on the sides. So it's a process we call straightening because we're very creative individuals. The way the Sea King worked was that you'd have the main probe and then you had a tail probe. And the tail probe would be down and it would lock into a big fantail that had a bajillion slots in it. So the moment you landed, it would naturally just slot into one of them and then you would just be safe from tilting. When you wanted to straighten the aircraft, you would bring the tail probe up, hook up some cables to the tail, and then just pull the tail around where you wanted it, right? And then drop the main probe into the center track, and then you're good to go. And then you could drag it in. So that was that. Because that was a tail dragging design, right? We had 2 forward gear and a tail wheel. The Cyclone was the opposite. We had a nose gear and then 2 main gear. So one of the original theories was to hook up basically the same type of winching system that we had for the tail and the Sea King and hook up to the nose, which in theory would work just perfectly, but just with the way that the kind of center of rotation and everything, it didn't work well in the Cyclone. So the new method was to then grab a machine that would then manually steer the nose wheel into whatever position we wanted. But we didn't have a second probe the way the Sea King had, right? Because like any 2 points make a line, we didn't have a second probe to generate that line to make us dedicated on straight. So what we had to do was then get a tray. So we'd straighten the aircraft, line it up with what we needed to, and then remove the machine, bring the tray, and then we would then roll the aircraft up onto this tray. Just the nose wheel would roll up onto this tray, which is fitted to the track. And so now that it's on the tray, now the nose wheel won't go anywhere. So now we're straightened. We're good.
Okay.
The thing is, though, now the weight of the aircraft is on the tray. And the moment you start pushing forward, right, theoretically, the weight of the aircraft's going to keep the tray moving with the nose wheel. But if the tray binds at any point, right, because we're talking about a track system that's exposed to some of the most hostile environment to metal, right? This is nothing but sea spray all the time. So everything gets corroded,
bad.
right? Everything gets corroded. It's just, it's the nature of ships. So if it binds at any point, the aircraft could theoretically, we'd put a chalk in front, but nonetheless, if it binds at any point, we're talking about, all the power that the ship can basically pull on cables, and it would occasionally jump the nose tray.
Oh gosh.
And so then you have to then remove the chalk, reverse back over this thing and then re-straighten the aircraft because you couldn't guarantee that when it jumped it didn't kind of misalign. So I remember that trying to solve this problem of like jumping the nose tray and figuring out was a whole thing. And then obviously in later deployments, they figured out that, no, we're just not going to use the nose tray at all. Here's a new solution, which was to basically use the same machine that we steered the aircraft with, but then it became a little bit bigger and it would lock itself into the track. So then it was just straighten it, lock itself into the track, drive it in.
Okay. So many different versions of how to get an aircraft.
And it's little things like that. So us coming up with like the solutions and providing the feedback and then helping test later iterations of this helped future detachments down the road to not have these problems. So it's like little things like that. There's just the entire deployment was a bit of a triumph just in and of itself to say that we could do this. So it's cool to be a part of that team, with those group people. We flew lots. We're still in one of the top hour counts of flying on a deployment for a Cyclone. So it went about as well as we could have asked for, and very happy and proud to be part of that.
Wow, that's just amazing that you were able to be part of that whole journey and testing period, and you paved the way for everyone following you.
I mean, it wasn't formal testing, but like, operational and just helping work out some of the
kinks, right? And now in your current position instructing future maritime helicopter pilots, what aspects of flying and operating this aircraft do you focus on most when you're teaching?
I mean, it's a military syllabus, which means that we have to follow the syllabus pretty much to a letter. And like, there's good and bad to that, of course. But we have a good amount of authority native to the schoolhouse to tweak and modify the training plan as we find kind of errors, problems, efficiencies. And so it looks dramatically different now than it did when I first started teaching, and certainly when I went through the school a few years prior to learn it.
Okay.
So it's been a good evolution. So a lot of the focus is not necessarily on what we're delivering to the student. It's about how we can make this better based on feedback from the students to constantly improve. And that's what I do like about this and the people I work with is that we are not necessarily looking for like efficiencies all the time. Like being efficient is good. And we don't want to cut corners. That's not what we're looking to do. But finding out places where the students are like, hey, we found that, this flight, not super useful. Like, we didn't need like, 4 extra trips in this, but if we could focus on this aspect, which we found to be a struggle, and then we do 1 or 2 more courses, see if that feedback is consistent, and then say, you know what, there's been some good feedback about this. We've observed as instructors that some students struggle sometimes with this. So why don't we cut this, add this, focus more on this aspect as well. And then really just strive to produce the best product that we can based on the TP, based on our own experiences, right? And then the fun challenge to all this is always trying to adapt the teaching styles to the needs of the student, because everybody learns differently. Everybody struggles with different aspects. We've been fortunate enough that we haven't had any students fail our course. And I don't know if that just speaks to how good and motivated our students who come out of the schoolhouse are, or how good the instructors are. But either way, I'm not going to complain. It's worked out really nicely.
It's probably a good combination of both.
And I can't really complain. It's all been a whole bunch of really good motivated people that have been had the fortune to instruct so far. And again, the instructors I work with are all incredible. So it's a great team overall. And we're just trying to, I guess, do the best with what we have, because we have a lot of control. And so whenever we don't just sit here and complain like, this syllabus is not doing what we want it to, and then just throw our hands up and say, that's it. We're empowered to improve it, make it better. Any professional development that we go and do, we come back and say, hey, why don't we include this or tweak that? So as to what we focus on.
That feedback is received really well.
Yeah. As to what we focus on, honestly, it's not necessarily exactly what we deliver. It's how we go about delivering it, and then making sure that the product is reflective of what the students want to work on. And the other half of it too is communicating to the operational units to make sure that the product that we're producing is meeting their needs and requirements. So there's a good feedback loop there of what we're trying to do.
And how many how big is the school? Like, how many students do you get to teach at a time?
A typical course is about 6 students. So
okay, so nice and intimate. So not too. You get to really focus on each of their development and help them through it.
Yeah, it's good, and like virtually all the ground school instruction is just like a classroom setting. It'll be like myself up front lecturing to 6 of them, and all of the actual flight, because we have a simulator as well. So the simulator can be as much as 2 students to 1 instructor, because we can have both the students in front, and the instructor can sit in like a jump seat with a control panel, which is all more fun for me. It's all more fun for me, weirdly enough. You'd think I'd want to be in the seat, but it's a lot of fun Because if you're still flying the machine or like helping them fly up front, like which is good when we have to demo new things, but if we're just working on stuff they've already learned, it's a lot easier for me as an instructor to simply sit where I'm not at the sticks, take the best notes I can, and I also have the ability to manipulate and inject whatever emergencies I want on my own timing instead of having there's like a DIAS operator who's like a civilian staff member who's over the radio comms with us. We can just tell him like, hey, can you inject this emergency now? And he's got the same screen that we'd have up there, but I'm in the seat. I don't have access to it. So it's nice when I'm in that jump seat that I can kind of control the situation as I want. But the rest of the instruction is just one-to-one. It'll be like myself or the student sitting next to me and teaching that way. So it's good. It's intimate. We can tailor the level of instruction and focus on the things that they're struggling with or not struggling with. And we get enough time. We make enough time. I shouldn't say we get enough. We make enough time as just fellow aviators to talk to the students about all of the intangible things, like how do you decide how emergency is going to be concluded? Like because it's easy to go through like an emergency philosophy and just say, yeah, here's your critical memory items.
Absolutely.
Here's how you analyze the system, like know your systems. Like that's all stuff that's very easy to teach, but it's little things of, okay, but what if this weird complicated scenario pops up? Like, well, then what do you do? Like this is a thing where there's no right or wrong answer. And so we have to teach them that. Like we don't go into like principles of leadership or anything. It's not where we're really trying, but if they ever have questions about that, we'll definitely provide our personal insights on how we manage like a crew of individuals as future aircraft captains and crew commanders that they're going to be aspiring to be. So that's not part of the syllabus. It's just we make time to speak to them just as fellow aviators and professionals.
Personal development as an aviator as well as their actual skills. No, that it's very important whether you're in the military or you're going on the track of becoming an airline pilot. We're all human in the end of the day, and we still need those kind of developmental moments.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then throughout your 18-year career, have there been key mentors, colleagues, or even family members who've significantly shaped your journey as a pilot?
So obviously I have to give a shout out to my wife. So
obviously
like my wife and my kids, managing the whole family with both of our careers has been give and take. It's been, managed chaos a lot of times. I've grown a lot, especially as a father. So that's one of those things that has changed who I am. And again, like working with my wife to make sure that both of our careers are progressing how we want them to it's been a fun challenge, and it's worked out well so far. So like that's all good. And again, that's been a huge influence, and just, all the personal things I could talk forever about my wife. She's incredible. So, and my kids absolutely just changed who I am. So, there's that. But from a professional standpoint, basically every single aircraft captain, crew commander I've had the pleasure of flying with, and probably more importantly, my detachment commanders. So every time we go sailing on a ship, we'll have 20 odd Air Force people, which will be eight. There'll be 8 air crew. So basically two crews of the 4 that we need, and then there'll be 12 technicians. So out of that 20 people, there'll be one person in charge, who'll be the major, who we refer to as the air officer, or simply the ARO, or the detachment commander. And they're a 2.5, and they can be either a pilot or they can be a TACO, that air combat systems operator I was telling you about. So they're going to be a crew commander in like almost every case. And so they're going to be a senior maritime helicopter aviator in some fashion. And so they'll be able to provide a lot of good feedback and mentorship. And every one of them that I sailed with helped shape my abilities, whether as an actual pilot specifically or as an officer more generally, for the better. And so I can name them all off. I mean, in no particular order: Major Fraser, Major Ferris, Major Waglin, Major Malone, and Major Considine, and God, it'd be really embarrassing if I forgot one of them. I think that's all of them. So they all like incredible MH aviators that would happy to fly and sail with again. Their ranks are different now, by the way, so I don't want anybody to get upset if they hear this. This was at the time. A few of them are lieutenant colonels and colonels now. So
I'm sure they'll forgive you.
Yeah. I do remember one conversation in particular, which had nothing to do with flying, but it was interesting to really kind of remind me of what we're doing here. And this is coming from the perspective of, I'm in a peacetime military. This would be very different if we were like fighting for our lives, right? But like in a peacetime military, in this case, I was talking to specifically Major Frazier, he was in a position at the time where he was kind of managing the careers of the people at the unit. So speaking to him about
Okay.
what my career goals and aspirations were. And I was telling him like, oh, I want to do X, Y, and Z. I want to deploy as much as possible. I want to get this, get that, so I can get promoted at this time, and then so on and so forth. At one point, he sort of stops me and just says, like, just keep in mind that no one has gone to their grave wishing they'd worked more.
That's
And
true.
I stopped and
That's
thought
very
about that.
true.
Yeah, so that always comes back to remind me of why I'm doing what I'm doing, especially now that I have the family. Like the focus is making sure that, my children have a present, and loving father, and my wife has a contributing partner, right? So, it's definitely changed how I view a few of these things. It's not that I don't want to ever get promoted, don't want to like progress or anything, but it's changed
Of
how I go about
course.
that progression. So
It changes your motivation just a little bit and gives you a moment to pause and reflect what's your purpose, why,
yeah,
and what you're putting all of your energy towards. I think about that every single day.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What advice would you give to aspiring pilots or someone considering a career in the Canadian Armed Forces aviation based on your own unconventional path? And that also includes the family aspect, career. What advice would you give them?
I mean, I think the easiest, shortest answer I could possibly give someone is never make the same mistake twice. And like, yeah,
Very good advice.
it's pretty simple. It's on the nose. But I always remind myself of that, if I make a mistake, like mistakes are going to happen. The hardest part is being able to get up from that mistake, be humble about it, accept it. And I think personally, having a culture, like we have a good work culture where if you make a mistake, you're open about it. You tell your peers that, hey, I made this mistake, right? I owned it. Here's what I think I did wrong and why I did it, right? And here's what we can do maybe to improve that. Or it's just, I made a stupid mistake in the moment. There's no kind of cultural issue that needs to be addressed. Just, this was on me, but I'm going to stand up and
Yep.
say that I am not infallible. And I think that's vitally important for everybody, right? Is one of the courses that I went on that I unfortunately didn't get the qualification for reasons outside of my control. So it wasn't just me not being competent
Okay.
enough, but one of the mottos of that course, that qualification, is to be humble, credible, and approachable. And
Wow, that's impactful.
and it's great because this is also the course itself and the qualification, if anything, comes with the opposite of being humble. It's literally a badge that says you are like the definitive expert in this field of military aviation. So what they remind you constantly though is that if you're on that, when you have that badge, you still have to be super humble about saying, I don't know everything, right? If you come to me with a question and I don't know, the question isn't, I don't know, and that's stupid. The answer is going to be, I don't know, and let's go look it up together, right? And as part of that, you need to be as approachable, which means you have to just be a generally likable individual. That is part of that humbleness of just engaging with people, asking what's going on, and just listening, right? Making sure that you are still there, just taking part in the greater picture. So that always sticks me. And the credibility part is super important, right? Is you're always learning. You're always opening up books. You're always trying to find something new to kind of wrap your brain around. And I try to take that pretty seriously by always, even if it's just reopening like the aircraft operating instructions again for the 70th time, and just rereading passages where it's like, I haven't looked up the automation section in a while. I should just relearn that just to make sure I'm not missing anything, because it's a pretty tricky section and not everybody's super swept up on it. So why don't I just go and spend 30 minutes or an hour just rereading this section, take a few notes, and just kind of ingrain that into your brain. So whether it's doing that or sitting down and learning something entirely new that maybe your immediate group of peers isn't super swept up on, so that you can become an expert on it, like that's going to serve everybody in the long run. So having that general approach to like life and training is good. So from an advice perspective, yeah, don't make the same mistake twice. Humble, credible, approachable is a great attitude to take with everything that you can going forward. Listen, ask questions. But I guess always get up after that mistake. That's the thing. You haven't failed until you stopped. So.
Oh, that's a perfect little soundbite right there. You haven't failed until you stop. That's so true.
Yeah.
Getting back up again.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's really it. I've made tons of mistakes. I'm free to admit to all of them. I tried to start the aircraft without hydraulics one time, which makes an awful noise and could potentially hurt it. So,
Wow.
and that's because I was going through the checklist too quickly. Like I thought I was absolutely the fastest starter in the West, and I was blasting through the checklist for the fourth or fifth time that day. We were doing a bunch of maintenance work, so it was just constantly turning the aircraft on, turned off, verify a bunch of things. And I was blasting through the checklist, and I just missed one line of the checklist that said, hydraulic ground pump. Missed it. Go to engage the aircraft, and all you hear is just rock hard actuators just against the blades. That really doesn't sound pleasant. So that kind of ruined the rest of the day. The aircraft was fine, but it still required a good, semi-lengthy inspection that just generated more work for the techs that I didn't need to generate. So, making mistakes like that and being able to admit to it is important. And then you just learn and grow from it. So now when I read a checklist, it is every single time we stop. If I'm going too quickly, I go back, read over the lines I just went through, verify that it's there. I've inserted breaks and pauses into my checklist where I stop and I look over every single aspect of the aircraft to make sure it's exactly what it needs to be at that point because of that. So, and I tell all the co-pilots I fly with why I do this, what lessons they can learn from that. And that's it. It's like to be open, share all that, and admit to my failings, of which there are many failings. So it's just constantly learning and
no pilot
growing.
has ever been without a failing, and multiple failings at that. Otherwise, they're lying or they're a robot.
Yeah. So that's really it. I guess I already said it. I know you repeat it again, but
yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your personal journey, your insights, and your advice. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
That's it for this episode of Skyward. A huge thank you to Captain Jason McGillis for sharing his incredible journey from walking into a recruiting office with no prior flying experience to flying the last of the Sea Kings and helping launch the Cyclone era to finally passing it all on as a flight instructor. The line that's sticking with me personally today is don't make the same mistake twice. And the 3 words that he mentioned, stay humble, credible, and approachable. These are so simple yet so powerful and exactly the mindset that turns good pilots into great ones and good people into the kind you'd follow anywhere. If today's conversation lit a spark, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know what resonated with you. I'm frequently checking DMs and comments. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep reaching for the sky. This is Pilot Mercedes. Clear skies, everyone.
Always get up after that mistake. That's the thing. You haven't failed until you stopped. At one point, he sort of stops me and just says, just keep in mind that no one has gone to their grave wishing they'd worked more.